Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Sian. Let's dive straight into what I read in August. There were 4 books this month, the first of which is More Than This by Patrick Ness, and it's a dystopian novel, as so many of Patrick Ness's books are, and it's a very intriguing one, especially the way it starts, which is with a boy drowning. He's in the sea, he's being thrown around by the sheer force of it, and he's fighting against it. Even though what he wants is to die, he's fighting against it, and just at the point when he thinks, oh, I'm gonna really try and fight this, he hits his head, and he hits his head hard, and he realizes that that is the end. Except that then he wakes up naked and alone in some kind of coffin type thing with tubes attached to him and all kinds of random stuff, and it turns out he's in his old childhood home, which is a very odd place for him to be. It's a place that brings back all kinds of awful memories about when he was younger and his brother going missing. They lived near a prison, and it's not a place he particularly wants to be, so he makes the assumption that it is hell because he's there are no other people there whatsoever, and he's trying to survive in this place and trying to work out how he got there in the first place, and this novel looks at all of that. The main character, the one who drowns at the very beginning, is called Seth, and there are 2 other kind of really main characters, and those are Regine and Thomas, and they're a very diverse set of characters. They work well together, yet they're a really unlikely trio of friendship, but that's all they have in this kind of strange world that they've woken up in. Seth is gay, and that part of the reason he wanted to kill himself is that the relationship in the world he's lived in has broken down and they are not allowed to see each other anymore, and Seth doesn't feel that life is worth living anymore. And I don't want to give away too many spoilers because I could give away an awful lot, but they find out that the world that they were living in, the one they have all died in, is not quite the world they thought it was. And that opens up this huge idea of what on earth is going on in either world. How do they get there? What are they doing here in this place they don't remember? And it is such a interesting dystology because it could happen, and you can totally see how it could happen. It reminded me a tiny bit of Ready Player One, just in the sense of immersing yourself into a world and really living it in like a digital way. And I think I'm not going to tell you any more about it, but I really enjoyed it. I gave this 4 stars. The only thing that let it down for me was the ending, because I was really frustrated. And again, I can't say what happened, but I was really frustrated at how the book ended. I really felt it could have ended differently, but maybe part of the magic of the book is the way it ended. I don't know. You tell me. If you've read it, tell me what you thought of the ending. The second book I read this month is called Skint Estate, and this is by Cash Carraway, and it is a memoir of poverty, motherhood and survival. And in it, Cash tells her life, how she lives in poverty, really struggling to make ends meet, and on a lot of occasions not making ends meet. How she is a fabulous mother to her daughter but cannot see it. How austerity hits so hard, both physically and mentally. There is no way that you can kind of get round that. I think it's an incredibly important book for anyone to read, because unless you want to live with your head like under the ground, this is happening right now in our country. This kind of inequality is happening. This kind of utter desperation is happening, and that's utterly wrong, and none of us are that far from this. We just have one job loss or one sickness or something like that, and all of a sudden you can't make your mortgage payment, you can't do things, and potentially you end up homeless or in a shelter. You know, you just don't know, and we can never kind of underestimate how powerful that is, which is why I think everyone should be reading this book, because we don't know, like I said, you don't know how quickly you could get to that point, and once you're at that point, people speak to you differently, they dismiss you, they are incredibly rude because of where you are in the hierarchy, which is horrific. As most of you know, I fundamentally disagree with hierarchies, and I really believe that everybody should be treated the same, no matter who they are, what they've done, what they look like. Nothing matters other than we are all human beings and we all deserve the same amount of respect from everybody. So I just really, it was a really harrowing read, but such an inspiring read, I guess, because you see how Cash is literally dragging herself out of this. And obviously she's written a book, you know, she's written an incredible book. I saw her on tour last year, I saw her play, and it was emotional, fantastic, absolutely amazing. So she is really making something of herself, and why shouldn't she? She deserves every opportunity that every other person gets. There's no reason she shouldn't be getting this, but she's also shouting as loud as she possibly can about injustice and social inequalities and how this government is forcing cuts and ultimately killing people because of austerity and cuts, and the rich are still getting richer and the poor are fundamentally getting poorer. This is such a powerful read, and I recommend that everybody reads it. The third book I read this month is called Goodbye for Now by Laurie Frankel. I know I read one of her books in July and I loved it so much that I was like, right, I've got to find something else that Laurie Frankel has written so that I can read it and devour it and love it. And I read it and I didn't love it. Oh, that was so disappointing. The premise of the story is that one of the main characters, Sam, kind of comes up with an algorithm which solves internet dating. It doesn't look at kind of what you put down you like, it looks at your browsing history, the things you buy, so it looks at what you actually like as opposed to what you portray you like, which is a great idea, except that the company he works for wants to make millions out of internet dating, and if the app is going to find the exact right person for you, then obviously they're not going to make money from that. So Sam meets the one person that it kind of links him up with, and they very quickly move in together. She's called Meredith. Meredith's grandma dies, and at this point the book gets a little bit strange. So Sam decides to invent an algorithm which is based on that same algorithm for dating, but it works in a way that delves into the past of anyone's history, all of their previous kind of FaceTimes, Skypes, any kind of video calls, and it kind of recreates this person in a hologram so that you can still contact them after they're dead. So you can still email them, you can text them, you can still chat to them on FaceTime, Skype, however you used to. You can do video calls with this person even though they're dead. And I just really struggled with it. I just didn't really see the point. I don't know, I just really struggled with the concept of this book, and I didn't like the idea, so I think it was really hard to get on board with how this kind of progresses and how Sam's making a living out of it and Meredith is making a living out of it, and there was some kind of real inevitability about the endings, and I wanted to love it, I really did, because I loved the last book I read so much, but this one, not for me. The fourth book I read this month is called Unholy, and this is the second in this Neil Shusterman trilogy. The first one was Unwind, which was one of the Bookish Mama's book club reads. I can't remember when it was for, June or July, and I really loved it. Again, it's a dystopian novel, and I really wanted to see what happened next. So this follows on from exactly where the previous story leaves off. You've got Lev, who has attempted to become a clapper who is going to blow himself up to kind of disrupt the world. You've got Connor, who is leading the whole resistance, basically. You've got Risa, who is now disabled, as she was at the end of the previous book, from the huge explosion that happened, and she is living with Connor on the airbase, trying to kind of look after all the children. But what they're finding is that there are fewer and fewer children coming to the base, and they discover that one of the children there, one of their kind of best, closest friends, closest allies, is in fact a double agent. He's actually working for the juvenile cops as well. So just a very quick recap, that the first one, the first book, children who are under 18 who do not behave, who are not kind of fitting in with society, and also a certain amount of children who are chosen for it are unwound. This means that they go to a camp and all their body parts are used for other people who are in need of body parts. So say, you know, you've got a dodgy hip like I have, I could get an unwound hip. It would be a brand new hip from somebody else. But these children are being, in essence, murdered, but there's some kind of debate as to whether they are or not, because their soul is living on through all their different parts. And so it's very intricate. So this story kind of comes in there, but they're finding that there is greater resistance to them all being in the airspace that they're in. There's also parts pirates, which are people who will sell young children to the black market, whether or not these children are up for being unwound. So there's a really intricate, really kind of dark undertone to this book, and I really love that. And they also, in this book, they make the first human completely out of unwound parts, which is obviously completely and utterly insane, but you could kind of see how it would happen. And that human obviously has all this knowledge from all these different people, and it can, I say it because I find it hard to say that it's a he or a she because it just seems so odd. So they can play musical instruments amazingly, but obviously their whole body has had to be trained to work because these are all different parts that have kind of been stitched together, including its face, which is different strips of skin of different ethnicities. So it's not just one ethnicity, it's a complete monster, as Risa calls it. And so this story just carries on their journey to resistance, to trying to break down the government. The characters are just so intense, really, I guess. And they bring in some new characters just to mix everything up a bit, but fundamentally those three main characters are your main characters running through this story. And it's just incredibly well written, and I cannot wait to read the third one in the trilogy. I can't remember if it's a trilogy of 3 or it can't be a trilogy of 4, can it? But I can't remember if there are 3 or 4 books in this. And that's it, the 4 books that I've read this month. I hope you've enjoyed this wrap up, and I'll see you again soon. Alright, bye.